Daern, Chapter 1, The Edge of the World, Part 3, Cusack. The Anietto restlessly flexed his taugelu, the 3 pairs of slender, whisker-like appendages that ran down his cheekbones. He curled his 3 fingers and thumb into a fist, the earthy brown skin of his arm looking dark under his leather glove. Just this last task and I will finally be able to start my journey south. He rubbed his fist into one of his large, pitch-black eyes, and picked up his pace, boots trudging along the hard-packed road that meandered through fields of barley. The Anietto glanced up and checked the position of Daern, the great moon. The edge of it was almost directly overhead, and light was just starting to shine around it, like a halo. It will be sunrise soon. Cusack had left the monastery, where he had been born, for the last time in the early morning. He groaned and readjusted the heavy satchel he carried. Its strap kept digging into his shoulder. It was a good thing Stone's Cradle was only a short distance from his home. Former home. He couldn't imagine having to lug the slab of solid granite much further. Not for the first time that morning, he wished the scriveners had selected a lighter material on which to transcribe a person's life. Panting, he finally conceded that a short break might not be a bad idea. He slid the heavy bag off his shoulder, carefully lowering it to the ground. As tedious as this task is, it would not do for it to be broken. He could just imagine the abbot's face if he had to report back that he had dropped and cracked the tablet. He massaged the ball of his shoulder, trying to get some feeling back into the sore muscle. He then clasped his hands behind his back and bent forward as far as he could. As he righted himself, sunlight swept steadily across the landscape. Daern had slid further towards the horizon, and the sun was now uncovered overhead. Daybreak. He tipped his waterskin back and drank deeply. The corner of the mottled gray tablet was poking out of his bag. Its surface was polished to a dull gleam. Carved into its smooth face were runes that he knew told the entire life story of one John Carstensen, recently deceased Cooper of Stone's Cradle. The abbot taught that all lives and minds were important, but Cusack had read the runes. John Carstensen worked hard. He got married. He had kids. He got old and sick. He died. The Anietto took another drink from the waterskin and stared out over the barley. Hopefully my own life will not be so simple. He hefted the satchel back across his shoulders and continued down the road. When he reached the top of the next rise in the land, he could see Stone's Cradle off in the distance. The human settlement was just one in a string of villages spread out along the northern border of the Fodifer kingdom, the last dregs of a network of small fort towns that had once ringed Sorcery, the vast forest. The village was nestled, or cradled, one might say, between 2 crags of stone, one to the west and one to the east. These acted as the village's primary defense, but sturdy wooden palisades were built across the north and south sides, spanning the gaps between the crags. There was a single gate in the south wall that stood open during the day to allow comings and goings between the village and the outlying farms and fields. At night, it was closed and locked tight. All of this sounded a lot more impressive than it actually was. The reality was that Stone's Cradle was a cozy little town. It was close to Sorcery, sure, but that had been quiet for many years now. Its walls were guarded by a handful of men armed with clubs and hunting bows, who spent most of their time dragging people home from the bar. The real defense of Stone's Cradle was the fact that it was so far from anywhere, even remotely important, that no one cared about it. The Anietto sighed. He estimated it would be about a half hour until he reached the gate. At least they have good Juma here. As he continued walking along, he heard a rustle from the barley field on his right. He glanced over, expecting to see a flock of birds, but there was nothing. No, wait. The barley was moving, the stalks bending gently as something slipped between them. "Hello?" Cusack called. Immediately the movement ceased. Highwaymen sprang, fully formed from his imagination, and his hand was already halfway to the sword at his belt. Maybe I should... No, it is probably just an animal. A fox, maybe. He looked around to make sure that no one had seen him jumping at shadows, before quickly heading down the road once more. You are getting ahead of yourself. Stone's cradle grew steadily until it was no more than a couple 100 paces ahead of him. He strode towards the gate, ready to hail the guard, who was usually peering out from the crude wooden watchtower that rose above the wall, or out of the small hatch set in the middle of the gate. The hatch was closed, though, and Cusack saw no one in the watchtower as he craned his neck. He reached the gate and banged his fist against it. The heavy thud died quickly in the quiet morning. He banged again. Silence. He kept a hand to his mouth and shouted towards the top of the wall, "Hey, is anyone in there?" Silence. You must be kidding me. Cusack looked around as though hoping an alternative method of entrance would present itself, then went back to banging on the gate. Still nothing. He pushed experimentally at the small hatch in the door. Maybe I could get this open. And then what? He looked from the tiny hole to his own wide, muscular shoulders. Yeah, that is not happening. Cusack hissed in exasperation and smacked his forehead against the gate. And this is why I need to get out of here. With a scrape, the hatch opened to his left, revealing a bewildered and haggard-looking man, mumbling to himself. What? Cusack turned slowly to glare into the hatch with one dark eye. Open the damn door. The man flinched and, without speaking, hastily closed the hatch. The sounds of the heavy wooden beam that secured the door reached Cusack through the wood of the gate. At long last it stood open. The gate would probably do a better job protecting the village on its own, without the assistance of the guard, if his appearance was anything to go by. Deep purple shadows hung beneath the man's eyes. His chin was blue with stubble, and an overwhelming stench of drink hung around him. Cusack stomped inside and scrutinized the guard. The man tried to stand up a little straighter, but it wasn't working very well. Cusack knew his face from his previous visits. Please do not tell me that you are drunk, Claude. It is not even midday. Hey, Cusack. Well, you see, this ain't what it looks like. I ain't drunk now, but last night was first drink, you know, and... First drink was last night? Cusack exclaimed, unable to hide his dismay. Free Juma had been the one redeeming light at the end of the tunnel on this dreary trip. Yeah, Claude replied dreamily. Opened up the 1640. It was really something. He stopped when he saw the look in Cusack's face. There's plenty left, though. I know Olga bought a couple of barrels, and Albert always keeps one for himself. Cusack winced inwardly as he imagined the exorbitant price the tavern owner, Olga, usually charged. The remaining barrels would all be sold, and he didn't have the coin to spare on indulgences. So, Claude said, were you just trying to catch first drink, or is there some other reason you come rattling my head so early in the morning? Cusack sighed as his mind was turned back to the far less pleasant task that awaited him. The granite memory tablet wrapped in his satchel seemed to grow heavier. I am here to see Katrin Karstensen. Her father's tablet has been prepared. He gently patted the bag. Ah, Claude said, seeming to sober up slightly. Really, 'twas a shame that. Red fever at his age. Yes, real sad, Cusack muttered. Well, I had best be going. Cusack turned to go to the west side of the village. Claude moved to block his path, though. Oh, wait, I guess you wouldn't know Katrin ain't Karstensen no more. She married John's old apprentice, Sven Faulkner. He's over by the east stone. I can show you if you like. No, that is all right. I will find him. Thanks. Cusack muttered and left Claude to his guard duty. He had never had much occasion to speak with Sven before, but Cusack had a rough idea of where he lived and had seen him enough to know what he looked like. The Eniato's boots on the hard cobbles of the road underfoot echoed off the towering stones. As he entered the village proper, he noticed all the signs of the impending harvest. Bleary-eyed men and boys were emerging from doorways. Most were carrying their lunches, wrapped in scarves or handkerchiefs, in one hand, and short-handled sickles in the other. Cusack had often wondered about the wisdom of wielding the razor-sharp harvest implement so soon after a night of drunken revelry, but shockingly there hadn't been a serious injury in years. He passed by one of the family-run distilleries and was unsurprised to see that it, too, was already a hive of activity. Its large front doors were thrown open, and every member of the family was out in force, including several young children that scurried behind the adults. The family was cleaning out a copper tank that no doubt would soon be used in the production of this year's batch of Juma. As he paused to watch a teetering child, clutching a full bucket of water in both arms, it occurred to him that his being here could not have come at a worse time. In a town where nearly everything revolved around the production of Juma, he fully expected that the young cooper and his new bride wouldn't exactly be pleased to see him. He massaged his aching temples, more than ever wishing for a drink. Maybe it will not be so bad. It is not like Sven is the only cooper in town. Surely he does not have to make that many barrels. Cusack didn't know much about distilling, but he did know that old barrels could be reused several times. Heartened by these thoughts, he approached the cooper's house with a renewed sense of confidence. Attached to the side of the little cottage was an open-air workshop where Sven, along with a couple of apprentices, stood tapping the last iron hoop over the staves of a brand-new barrel. The cooper stretched and turned around to reach for a jug of water when he spotted the Enieto standing there, with the wrapped tablet in hand. The man's sweaty face showed a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "You're here to see Cat, ain't you?" the cooper asked. "Yes," Cusack replied. "Damn it. You couldn't have waited a couple more weeks?" Sven grumbled. His two apprentices gave each other nervous looks. Cusack felt his newfound confidence draining, but he had a job to do, so he stood up straight and met the man's stern eyes. "I am sorry for the inconvenience, but I am here according to the instructions left by John Karstensen." At the mention of his old master's name, Sven's face softened, and he ran his hand through his hair. Cusack noticed that though Sven was still young, his hair was already getting thin. All right. She's inside. I'm gonna tell you now, though, she ain't gonna take this well." Great. It had been 4 months since Karstensen's death, but Sven's tone was not encouraging. The cooper put down his tools, and after a few quick instructions to his apprentices, led Cusack inside the little house. There a young woman stooped over the fireplace, sweeping the ashes from the stones. "Katrin Faulkner, daughter of John Karstensen?" Cusack asked. The woman turned towards him, her face already growing pale. She only nodded, lower lip trembling. "I am called Cusack. I have come from the Brynholm Monastery, in accordance with your father's final wishes. His soul has passed into the mists, but from his flesh shall spring new life. He shall not be forgotten." As he spoke, Cusack unwrapped the memory tablet and held it out to Katrin. She accepted it with shaking hands and sat down at the table. She spoke thickly. "He is really gone, then?" "Yes." Katrin stared for a moment at the graven words on the tablet, words she likely couldn't even read, and then burst into tears. Thanks for listening to Daern, a story in progress. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and if you really enjoyed it, consider donating through Patreon. Any amount will go a long way towards helping us bring more content to you. Links to our Patreon and our website are in the description. See you next week, and have a good one.